Some days, Rarity really wondered why she loved her mare friend so much. This was definitely one of those days.
I can't believe you did that.
She glared sourly at the object of her affection.
What?
Applejack frowned and swallowed the piece of apple she had been chewing on, oblivious to the small speck of apple pulp that still remained on her cheek.
What did I do this time?
What did you do?
Rarity snapped.
I'll tell you what you did do. Here I was, discussing my new collection with hoity-toity, when you, Applejack, storm into my boutique with mud on your coat and branches sticking out your vein, kiss my cheek, and loudly declare that you gotta borrow the can real quick, nature calls.
Hey, when you gotta go, you gotta go.
Applejack shrugged.
That's not the point.
Rarity groaned through her teeth in frustration.
Would it kill you to try to show a bit of tact and consideration? At least when you decide to drop by the boutique? Is that really too much to ask?
Applejack rolled her eyes.
Look, I just don't see what the big deal is. You know I don't care what any pony thinks of me.
But I do! It has been very well established that I do, in fact, care what other ponies think. Especially when you seem to go out of your way to embarrass me and in front of hoity-toity of all ponies.
Applejack jerked, as if stung by something. Then her expression darkened.
Oh, really?
She said in a low voice.
I'm embarrassing, am I?
Yes!
Rarity yelled. But then she saw the look on Applejack's face and realized she might have gone too far.
Look, I understand I can't change who you are, but I just wish you wouldn't be such a...
She trailed off.
What? Go on, Rarity. You wish I wasn't such what?
Rarity bit her lip. Yes, she had definitely gone too far.
Applejack, please!
Nah, I get it.
Applejack interrupted.
You think I'm an embarrassment. Silly Applejack, the embarrassing country bumpkin. That's me. Oh, you're fine with having me for a mare friend when it's just us. Y'all just don't want to be seen with me in public, huh?
She turned away, but not before Rarity saw the tears in her eyes.
You're ashamed of me.
Rarity gasped, and her own eyes teared up.
How can you even say?
Save it.
Applejack snapped and headed for the door.
I ain't in the mood for your silly dramatics. I'm going home, before I embarrass you anymore.
Applejack, wait!
But it was too late. Applejack had already slammed the door shut behind her. Alone, Rarity remained frozen in her spot, her lip quivering. Then she stomped the floor hard with her hoof.
Applejack, you nincompoop!
She stormed into the inspiration room with tears flowing freely from her eyes. Throwing herself on her bed, she curled up in a ball and cried deeply. A desperate, unladylike bawling that sent painful shudders through her entire body. She hiccuped over and over between the convulsions.
Stupid. Applejack!
But after crying into her pillow for several minutes, the worst pain seemed finally to have passed, and Rarity felt somewhat better. Good enough, at least, to start feeling guilty about her own behavior. Applejack's words had hurt her deeply, but an increasingly vocal part of her wondered if she didn't deserve it. She had been the instigator of the fight, after all, and she managed to thoroughly insult her mare friend all for her own petty vanity.
I'm in a stupid way. What was I
Sitting up, still sniffling, she wiped the fresh tears off her cheek and saw some of her makeup rub off on her hoof.
Oh my!
She whimpered, still not in full control of her voice.
I look like an outright disaster.
She let slip a bitter chuckle. Even now she kept fussing about her looks.
Shallow and vainglorious Rarity, who only cares about looking pretty. That is I. I'm so pathetic.
It was up to her to fix this. She knew that. She had to go to Sweet Apple Acres and apologize. Beg Applejack to forgive her if that's what it took to make everything go back to how it used to be. Yes, that was precisely what she would do. But not right away. She was still too upset. The wounds were too fresh, and Applejack was surely still taking her anger out on some poor apple trees. Rarity would find her and apologize once they'd both had time to calm down. In the meantime, she still had work to do. In truth, she did not feel very inspired at all, but right now she needed some kind of distraction or she would just start crying again. She dragged herself out of bed, forcing herself to go through the motions. The fight had left her so distraught she could not even remember her schedule for the day. She shuffled over to her work desk and tried to bring some order to the clutter of notes and sketches. Did she have any more appointments today?
Please don't let me have any more appointments today.
She picked up her calendar with her magic and threw a quick glance at it. Then her head snapped back around and she stared at it while her lungs drew a sudden, drawn-out gasp of horror. A single name dominated the calendar's current date. She had written it in capital letters with red ink and underlined it 3 times.
What?
She shrieked, refusing to believe her eyes.
But no! That's not... Is that today?
How could she possibly have forgotten? This had to be a mistake. Maybe she'd gotten the dates wrong. Maybe yesterday had just been a dream and today was actually tomorrow. She quickly located her morning newspaper and double-checked the date. There was no mistake. Today was still today. Today was the day. This was the day Gala Glitterati would grace the Carousel Boutique with his presence. In fact, he'd probably arrive any minute now. Rarity leaped to her hooves and scrambled to get ready, her fight with Applejack momentarily forgotten in the panic.
Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Makeup, I have to put on new makeup. How does my wing look? Brush, where's my brush? Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh.
It wasn't just vanity anymore. Looking presentable and giving a good impression was now a necessity. Hoity-toity was one thing, but Gala Glitterati was an icon of the highest order. In the world of fashion, his word was law. If he said something was fashionable, then it was fashionable because he'd said it. Rarity still wasn't sure how he'd even heard of her. Perhaps Sapphire Shores or Photo Finish had happened to mention her at one of his famous soirees. Or maybe her status as a national hero was finally paying off. It did not really matter. What mattered was that this was Rarity's big chance to become a household name in equestrian fashion. Of course, if she screwed this up, she could count on becoming persona non grata on every social scene in the country forever. And that was why nothing, absolutely nothing, was allowed to go wrong today. Rarity got herself cleaned up in record time, disguising her puffy red eyes the best she could while reapplying her makeup and brushing her disheveled mane until it looked at least passable. There was no time to try anything extravagant. Had she remembered the appointment, she would have spent the entire morning preparing, but now the casual look would just have to do. When she was finally ready, Glitterati still had not shown up. Rarity thanked the spirits of style for fashionable lateness. With nothing else to do, she started pacing nervously back and forth, mumbling,
Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh.
Then it happened. The bell on the front door rang, signalling that some pony had entered her boutique.
Buongiorno, and 1,000 pardons for my tardiness. I ran into the most particular pink pony on my way here, and allowed myself to be distracted. You are Miss Rarity, see?
Gala Glitterati was tall and lean, caramel-coloured and raven-maned. He was impeccably dressed in a blazer, shirt and scarf outfit that looked both elegant and casual. Simple, but offset by an extravagant fetlock watch and a pair of very expensive-looking designer glasses. Glitterati did not need to make a spectacle of himself like Sapphire Shores. He understood the importance of subtlety. Rarity stepped forward on shaky knees and tried to muster her most pleasant smile.
Yes, and you are most welcome, Mr. Glitterati. I can't tell you what an honor this is.
Nonsense. I simply happened to be in the mood for something unusual for my next get-together. And I was told by some trusted friends that this quaint little town happens to harbor a genius designer.
Oh, I'm not sure I go that far.
Rarity struggled hard against the desire to squeal with glee.
Well, why don't you come on in and we'll discuss the details of your commission.
To Rarity's relief, Glitterati certainly lived up to his reputation as a gentle colt. He was well-mannered and pleasant to talk to, not nearly as snobbish as she had feared he might be. More fancy-pants than jet-set. As they got to work comparing his wishes to Rarity's own ideas, the fashionista slowly started to relax. As expected, Glitterati knew what he wanted and gave Rarity certain specific instructions, but at the same time, he allowed her leeway for artistic expression and encouraged her to be creative. Aside from his exquisite taste, she marveled at how much he seemed to know about the craft itself. In short, it looked as if everything would miraculously go according to plan. Once they had ironed out the details, Rarity started taking Glitterati's measurements. And that was when the doorbell chimed a second time, and Rarity heard Applejack's familiar voice call out,
Rarity? We need to talk.
A cold shiver went down Rarity's spine, and she felt a hard lump of fear in the pit of her stomach.
Oh no, not again! Not now! Applejack, this isn't really
She looked up and fell silent, her mouth agape. The Applejack who had entered the boutique looked so different from her usual self that for a split second Rarity thought she was some pony else. Her coat was spotless and almost seemed to glow with a golden sheen. Her mane and tail had been brushed and intricately braided, and she had traded her everyday red ribbons for green ones, which Rarity knew for a fact were reserved only for special occasions. Even more shocking, Applejack was not wearing her hat, which was almost unheard of. Instead, she had chosen to wear an elegant hairband resembling an olive branch, matching the ribbons. And was she wearing makeup? Rarity was speechless. She already knew Applejack cleaned up nicely when she wanted to, but the farm pony would normally only consider such a thing under exceptional circumstances, such as the grand galloping gala, a royal wedding, or the coronation of one of her close friends. Not on a Tuesday. At first, Applejack seemed entirely focused on Rarity, entering the room with a determined look on her face. But when she noticed Glitterati, she suddenly stopped. She gave the stallion a bashful look.
Oh, pardon me. I wasn't aware you were entertaining a customer, Rarity. Please don't mind me. I can always come back later.
Rarity blinked.
What?
Oh, there is no need for that, Signorina. At least not on my account. Miss Rarity, won't you please introduce me to your lovely friend?
Of course.
Rarity still eyed Applejack in confusion.
Applejack, this is Gala Glitterati. Mr. Glitterati, this is my mere friend Applejack.
It still felt a bit odd for her to be so open about dating a mare, but then it was hardly a secret that Glitterati preferred stallions himself.
Que bello! It is a pleasure, Miss Applejack.
Glitterati smiled. Applejack gasped.
Oh my. The Gala Glitterati? Oh, the pleasure's all mine. Rarity has spoken very highly of you. Now, I may be biased, but I dare say you shall not regret doing business with her. When it comes to fashion, she is without a doubt the most talented pony I have ever met.
Rarity still could not believe her ears.
What?
Indeed. Then I presume you are quite the fashionista yourself. I can tell you are a mare of good taste.
Applejack's smile did not falter, but for a brief moment her eye twitched ever so slightly.
Me? Oh, I'm afraid I'm not terribly up to date on such things. Though, when spending as much time with Rarity as I do, one can't help but pick up on a few things.
I would imagine so.
As the two kept chatting, Rarity silently continued with her measurements. Her motions were mechanical, though, as her racing thoughts focused on the bizarre turn the situation had taken. She had no idea why, but by some kind of miracle, Applejack had apparently picked this particular afternoon to suddenly metamorphose into a proper lady. And that was a good thing, wasn't it? Rarity should have been relieved, grateful, even happy that her lover had finally decided to raise herself up to her own high standards of conduct. So why wasn't she? Why did she still have that gnawing feeling of anxiety and panic inside? Why did this feel so wrong?
Why does hearing her talk like that hurt so much?
So tell me, Applejack, what is it that you do for a living?
Applejack's eye twitched again.
I am in the catering business. Yes, I manage a lot of catering.
Oh, I see. That's why.
I say, you two must make quite the couple then.
Glitterati carried on, seemingly oblivious to the hesitation in Applejack's voice.
What is the name of your firm? Perhaps I could hire you for my upcoming soiree as well. Make it a 2-for-1, so to speak.
More eye twitches.
Well, that is to say...
Applejack!
They both turned to look at Rarity, who blushed when she realized her outburst had been louder than intended. She put down her measuring tape and turned to the stallion.
Mr. Glitterati, I'm terribly sorry to ask this of you, but would you mind waiting here for a few minutes? I would like to speak with Applejack in private.
But of course.
Glitterati gave her a graceful nod of approval.
Please, take as much time as you need.
Thank you! Be right back!
Rarity more or less dragged Applejack into the workroom, closing the door shut behind them. Left alone in the main room, Gala Glitterati smiled.
Ah, l'amour. To be young and in love.
Looking around, he noticed Opalescence sitting on a table, washing her fur. Approaching the cat, he reached out a hoof to pet her.
Here, kitty, kitty.
Opal hissed and swiped her claws at him. Closing the door behind them, Rarity immediately turned to look straight at her mare friend.
Applejack, enough! That's enough! Do you hear me? You can stop now!
Why, whatever do you mean, Rarity, darling?
Said Applejack, with just a hint of an edge to her false Manhattan dialect.
Stop it!
Rarity's voice turned pleading.
Please, Applejack! No more! You've proved your point!
Applejack looked perplexed and a tiny bit offended.
Rare? I ain't trying to prove a point. I came here to apologize.
You... what?
Rarity blinked. Applejack sighed, turning her eyes away in shame.
I said some downright awful things to you, Rare. And I understand if you hate me now. But after I left back then, I did some thinking, and I realized y'all were right. Sometimes I'm just not considerate enough. Not to mention as stubborn as the day is long. I gotta learn to be more mindful of your feelings if we're gonna be together. And I still want us to be together, Rarity. So I came here to say I'm real sorry about everything I said.
She hung her head.
Got myself prettied up and everything. I thought maybe you'd like it.
You're beautiful,
Rarity whispered, her eyes tearing up for the second time that day.
Simply beautiful.
Applejack blushed.
Anyway, when I saw that glitterati fella, I figured I could make up for my other blunder if I brushed off my old Manhattan manners for a spell. I'm not a complete idiot. I know how much this deal means to you.
Rarity stared at her.
You did all that for my sake?
Well, yeah, that's what you wanted, ain't it?
No! No, I mean, yes, I wanted you to be more considerate, but this is too much! It's killing you, Applejack!
Now, let's not get all dramatic again.
Don't deny it!
Rarity looked straight into Applejack's eyes, her brow furled.
This is what they did to you, isn't it? Your aunt and uncle. They made you ashamed of who you were and tried to turn you into some vapid, shallow little dress-up doll, and you hated it. You still hate it. Do you really think I can't tell? How do you think it makes me feel to know I made you do it all over again?
Applejack frowned, looking down at the floor again.
I don't mind if it's for you.
Rarity gently touched Applejack's cheek, lifting her face so they were looking at each other again. She leaned close, resting her horn against Applejack's forehead, and whispered,
Applejack, listen to me. I'm touched you would go this far for my sake. But the pony I love, the Applejack I fell in love with, would never compromise herself, never try to be some pony she's not. That integrity and strength is what I really love about you. Not how you look or dress or talk. I still want us to be together as well. But I want my Applejack. I want the real you and no pony else.
Rare, I don't know what to...
Oh, shut up!
Rarity kissed her. It was a very good kiss. In Rarity's personal opinion, it was one of the best they had shared so far. When they finally broke away from each other, Applejack had a goofy grin on her face.
So, this means we're okay?
I don't know.
Rarity smirked and nuzzled her lovingly.
Tell you what, come by later this evening and we can talk some more.
That'd be wonderful.
Speaking of wonderful, who did your mane?
Granny Smith helped me. Did my makeup, too. Turns out the old lady knows all kinds of tricks.
I think she might even teach me a thing or two. I shall have to remember to ask her.
They fell silent for a moment, simply relishing each other's closeness. Then Applejack sobered up somewhat.
Rare, you do forgive me, right? I need to hear it from you.
I forgive you, but only if you forgive me. I was an idiot too, you know. And please, promise you won't ever scare me like that again.
Rarity, you got yourself a deal.
Thank you. Now then, let's not keep Glitterati waiting, shall we?
They stole another kiss on their way back. After 3 failed attempts and a slightly scratched hoof, Gala Glitterati had given up on trying to pet the cat.
Rather temperamental, aren't we?
He muttered, eyeing her with a mix of annoyance and respect. Opal simply glared at him. Glitterati was relieved when the two mares returned from the workroom, and he immediately noticed something had changed between them. The previous tension was gone, and they both looked somewhat flushed, trading smiles and coy glances. He grinned.
I take it all is well.
Oh, wait, yeah, I ain't kidding.
Applejack beamed like a sun.
Let me tell you, Glitters, I feel like the luckiest girl in Equestria right now. Anyway, I'd love to stay and chat, but I think it's high time for me to skedaddle. Them apples ain't gonna buck themselves, you know?
She winked at him. Gala Glitterati blinked.
What?
Thank you for stopping by, Applejack.
Rarity said with a warm smile.
I'll see you later tonight then.
Rare, you bet your bottom lip you will.
Applejack laughed, and then gave the stunned Glitterati a final nod.
Happy trails, Glitters. Hope you like your threads.
As the farm pony left the boutique, closing the door behind her, Glitterati turned to Rarity.
I must admit, I am now utterly confused.
Try as she might, Rarity could not hold back her laughter. Finally, everything was back to the way it should be. If there was anything that made Rarity seethe, it was mud. She did not mind dirt in moderation, but mud caused her stomach to churn. The vile, churning filth sloshed with her every step, and she felt the chill of old rain seep into her bones with it. The sky, too, must have felt it, for storm clouds still hung low and dark in the sky, having emptied their contents to the ground below, where Rarity was slogging through the muddy road as fast as a filly her age could possibly canter. But why? Well, it was for a filly. She was the most uncultured filly in Rarity's class, and unlike sweet, dorky, but in a positively charming way, cheerily, this little filly was stubborn, unchanging, utterly and unbearably local, and said every word on her mind so every comment could feel like a pebble under hoof with how blunt they were. An honest filly. Rarity always wondered if she simply had to tell the truth all the time. The filly who cried Timberwolf in all the old bedtime stories must surely be a better friend than this filly. Friends. How odd a term to apply to this young filly, whom Rarity was only taking purely charitable interest in as she charged through the mud of one of the most rural parts of Ponyville, little white marshmallow muzzle crinkled with disgust and determination both. She was not friends with this filly. Were she to at least share any hobbies and any perfectly civilized pursuits, or even the slightest interest in any of the arts, then Rarity could consider the brutish little filly who aced every maths test and knew every local plant. But oddly, nothing about the true beauty of more delicate floral hobbies, which herb growing certainly wasn't. A burning rival at the very least. They both worked hard enough. Yet, there was still a kind of rivalry between them. Applejack was nice in most ways, but not to Rarity. She always brought the biggest lunches, and somehow something as simple as a homemade apple pie had Rarity wishing to trade the watercress sandwiches that she had made herself once. But she'd never admit that Applejack's lunch was good or desirable or tasty. She'd swallow politely, avert her eyes, and not drool oafishly at such a sight. Once, Applejack even spat sunflower seeds at Rarity. It was disgusting. The nerve! But then, after one long weekend, Applejack did not come to school. And maybe that would be perfectly all right, Except Big Macintosh, Applejack's older brother, did not come to school either. That was unlike the Applefolds. Their father, a stallion of the Apple family, just as their mother was of the Pear family, always had his mother, Granny Smith, walk the two eldest to the schoolhouse every morning. Their granny also made sure that each of them had their lunch basket gripped between their teeth. Apples did not miss school unless they were sick, injured, or out of town, and even as Rarity ran through the mud, Applejack had not been to school, though for other reasons. Apparently, Applejack's mother was out of town, and every pony was looking for her. Rarity thought that was strange, because there was record of her leaving. A few farmers on the other side of town had seen her walk off one night and heard her voice. But then, she was simply gone. Rarity's mother had talked to Granny Smith a long time that day, and her father had to keep an eye on Sweetie Belle since she was such a fussy baby. And Rarity? She wasn't allowed to listen to the grown-ups talk. She just had to go to school the next day, and she wasn't going to be like her parents and Granny Smith, whose worry whispers were everywhere, kept hushed in hallways where little fillies like Rarity could just hear bits of them. Rarity was going to be a good, helpful filly. Today, Rarity was a filly of action. Every pony was hush, and their words were muffled by raps of long silence and indirect stares. But Rarity knew that simply wasn't going to do. Applejack's gaze was weighted toward her desk, her green stare fixed downward on what appeared to be nothing. The front of her mane wasn't properly combed, but Rarity wasn't going to bug her about that then. Her mind was made up. She saw some lucid sadness in those green eyes, pouring forth from under a goldish mane that never sank into the eyes of the freckled filly before. She had even forgotten her lunch basket, and that wasn't anything like Applejack, because she knew that her mother always packed the two elder Apple siblings a whole basket full of homemade food. Except Rarity didn't know what to say. Surely her mother would be back the next day. The apples took trips all the time, but they were always back eventually. She had a colt and two fillies to take care of, which was one more foal than Rarity's mother was used to, so it had to be very hard to live like that. No pony's mother just floated away like a breezy. But in math class, which was Applejack's favorite, Rarity watched in horror before any pony else noticed, as Applejack put her head down on her desk and cried into the small pile of cheery white daisies that she was supposed to be sorting into fractions like the teacher had written on the blackboard. Applejack also had not spoken the oath to Equestria about working to preserve harmony and better Equestria, thinking for the greater good and all related things, clearly enough while looking at the portrait of Princess Celestia every classroom in all of Equestria had, and her mumbles had spilled into nothing before the rest of the class had finished. That was strange too. But Rarity said nothing that day. It was on the next, at lunch, when Rarity walked over to Applejack on the playground, vowing to do what she had not been brave enough to do the day before. Sometimes a lady must do what a lady must do. No pony else was talking to Applejack about why her mother wasn't home. Was it not said that apples were born to their home, and they were buried there too? Their whole family were honest, respectful ponies, and now that Applejack's mother was gone, no pony was asking the honest questions. Rarity had done what should have been done, and that was to stop whispering and hiding from what was surely the most simple answer there could be, and the one no pony seemed to want. While Applejack pouted over a poorly made peanut butter and jelly sandwich made by her older brother, why her father couldn't help Rarity didn't know, and sat all alone, Rarity marched over to her, and she loudly asked Applejack why she didn't have a mother anymore. A teacher had come out and hushed a crying, angry Applejack. 2 more schoolmarms were needed to keep a screeching Rarity in line. Her blood-curdling wails made every head turn to see a filly whose face was contorted in rage and slathered with chunks of peanut butter that knotted her well-groomed mane, marred her lip gloss, and clung to her coat, much like the mud she slogged through now. For weeks afterwards, Rarity found it easy to refuse to talk to Applejack, even if they had every class together and occasionally liked to play at recess and in gym before their fight. Rarity couldn't see what the problem would be. Big Mac wasn't talking much either, even by his standards. Most ponies called him quiet, but Rarity always said the more elegant brooding, since it was a fine description for the youth. Rarity's mother had told her that Applejack needed a friend like her more than ever, and Rarity didn't get the time to explain that Applejack was not her friend. She was just... well, they were in a lot of classes, so they saw one another as often as friends did. There were those times when they played together. Occasionally they even saw one another at town events. At the last Fallen Filly Fair, Rarity won Applejack a particularly nice pinwheel, and Applejack had given her one of her family's caramel apples for free. And then they snacked on ice cream before Rarity had gone to play with her real friends and show the claw machine what a proper lady could do. Applejack had simply gone back to selling apples, and that day Rarity felt like a foreign noble at an exotic bazaar. Such was the excitement of the fair, and she lost herself in fleeting fancies that night, dreaming about what Princess Celestia felt when she saw foreign places. Was it anything like what Rarity felt that night? That night was absolutely ages before Applejack's mother had run off, and Applejack had never looked so defeated then, when her mother could not be found. She bucked apples for a living and did chores like storybook peasants did the hard shares of labour, working their way through the early equestrian social staircase. Now she didn't help any pony with their math homework, Rarity included, or do anything like she used to, like playing with her new puppy, Winona, which Rarity remembered because she had made Applejack's dog a bow for her collar before their big fight. Rarity was puzzled to how Applejack, a bright and talkative filly who rambled endless country phrases that Rarity used to think were riddles, could hide under her mother's old hat all day in class. But then again, Rarity was taken aback by how Applejack couldn't bother to wear mane bows at the least, which would be much more fitting for a filly, or how she never changed the colour of which hair ties she wore. They were a classic, Rarity supposed, rustic even, and they were worn by faithful, reliable Applejack, with her cute freckles and hearty laugh. Once the rainy spring season came, and storm after storm battered Ponyville, mud was everywhere. Many back roads were unusable, and none more so than the one Rarity trudged through now, like some knight-errant off to rescue fair Applejack from wallowing in self-pity. "Sorry, darling," Rarity would tell her, "but that's my job." Here was she, an aspiring designer whose self-taught beginnings somehow weren't enough to get her a cutie mark, cantering through filthy backgrounds and woods on a quest to discover why one of the brightest fillies of Ponyville School and her brother hadn't been seen for so long. It was even sillier, not because Rarity had outgrown such play. At her age they were properly called theatrics, but because every prince, daring knight, and honourable stallion who was dashing away on some pursuit was not just pursuing something. They pursued some pony as well, a charming, kind, and woe-struck damsel, most certainly in distress, whose love they sought. It was like something Princess Miamore Cadenza, young and under the sun's wing, would say. Love was her domain, or so Rarity had heard of the sort of half-god princess that was adorned with wing and horn but no divine alicorn like her aunt. But Rarity did not love Applejack. Most certainly not. She wasn't beautiful or well-mannered. Applejack was a little pretty, but she also fought like a colt, even though she was a filly, and that simply did not sit well with Rarity. Rarity would still rescue her anyway. She had missed too much school. The playground felt strange without her, and that wasn't because Rarity liked the silence between them. She did not, no matter how awful her post-peanut butter main cut was. But it felt better when Applejack was there. Those floods could have taken any pony too. The waters could have swept any member of the local helpers and weather patrol away. It was even odd that the gawky teenager, truthfully she wasn't much older than Rarity's short number of years, Fluttershy, survived, and the old cottage she had been living in alone had... That, of course, was odd to Rarity, a filly who read every bit of noir fiction in the local library tree. She knew that the odd teenager, her mother had called her an emancipated minor, at least would have had to be coping with heavy flood damage. It really could have taken any pony, couldn't it? Any pony other than Rarity, that is. She was singing to Sweetie Belle upstairs. Hush now, quiet now. Any pony could have died in that terrible, house-shaking storm. Why did it take the old librarian? He was a kindly old earth pony who insisted on giving back to the community. So why did he have to give it his life? Who was going to remember which fashion magazines and mystery novels Rarity liked best? Who was going to make sure Cheerily got her test prep books when she studied late? Or that Fluttershy got her animal guidebooks and Big Mac's a cappella books were put on hold until he could walk down to Golden Oaks? Not crisp pages. Not anymore, at least. Most important of all, why did that no-good storm cut Applejack and Big Mac's father out of this world when he only wanted to help steady a bridge? Who was going to wait for Applejack's mother to come home now? What would Applejack's mother think when she did? She was going to, wasn't she? What could she possibly be doing that made her spend so much time away from her family? She was an apple farmer, not a pop star like Sapphire Shores. She didn't need to go on tours or leave her farm, so why should she? Rarity did not have an answer to that, and Applejack didn't either. But Rarity wasn't about to let Applejack stay cooped up in the dungeon of mourning and never come back to school. It was like all the teachers just forgot about her, and that simply wasn't fair. So when Rarity, with her chest heaving and her mane muddy, semi-dreadlock tangles she would deeply regret when this was all over, reached the arch of the Apple family's property and charged up to the barn door, her trudging a foul sound as she stampeded across the property in search of fair Applejack and looked for any lights on in the barn windows. In search of any pony, really. The farm looked so lonely, even to Rarity, who was hyperventilating under globs of ugly, hideous mud. Then, as though she were imitating an uncivilized hillbilly, she raised her forehooves and banged the barn doors like a drum, pounding them mercilessly and screaming for dear life.
Applejack, open up, please. We need to talk. It's filthy out here. Please, Applejack, there's mud and it is positively dreadful. Disgusting. Mud!
Rarity shivered and trembled under the filth that burdened her.
Please?
She whimpered. Silence rolled on.
It's cold. Won't you let me in?
Her hooves ached, and she was certain that she had chipped the lovely polish that she had applied. In the barn was the sound of hoof steps, low, inconstant, muffled, and syrup-slow to her quickly pricked ears. She tried to hold her breath and strained to hear those heavy footsteps among the hay on the other side. She gasped, knowing that there was probably only one pony who could make such a ruckus.
Applejack?
Nope.
Came a familiar, deep voice, startling Rarity. And it was not Applejack's. She cleared her throat politely.
Ah, Big Macintosh! Hello!
He did not move, but he did not say anything either.
Is your grandmother home?
Yep.
Oh, well, that is good. Is she well? Are you well? You sound sad and, well, none of you have been at school. Applejack and you, that is. Is there something wrong?
There was a long pause.
Yup.
Are you not in the mood to talk? I can come back later to talk.
With Granny?
Big Mac's sudden, deliberate interjection was like a thunderclap compared to the yups and nopes that she could have labelled a barrage of if they weren't so passive.
No?
Rarity said, gently, so as not to seem abrasive.
I wanted to see if your sister was here, so I could speak with her. There is something I wanted to say to Applejack, even if I am covered in mud, and Applejack is home, isn't she?
If Rarity's hoof wasn't covered in mud, she would have brought it to her face. How stupid, how completely and utterly stupid. What kind of a question was that, so nervous and meekly delivered for a high-strung filly like Rarity? Applejack is home, isn't she? She might as well have asked if apples bucked apples too. Or, if she was truly despicable, she might have asked if they had heard from their mother, wherever she was. How had they still not found her? Equestria didn't look that big on the map, and Rarity could even see the most elite city, Canterlot, from Ponyville. Why would she go anywhere else? Did she go on a vacation in one of the southern nations?
Nope.
Big Macintosh said firmly, but solemnly, startling Rarity out of her speculations, something the whole town stopped doing after a while, and no more search parties were sent out, merely inquiries mailed to Canterlot that never went anywhere, and missing pony posters stopped getting tips. Odd, odd, odd. Rarity did not know her jaw was hanging open until the wind tickled the back of her throat.
What?
She sputtered, sapphire eyes wide, as she looked around the empty, quiet farm in flabbergasted disbelief.
She's not here?
Nope.
What happened? Did she leave?
Like your mother, Rarity added silently, heart fluttering in her chest a bit painfully.
Yup.
Why didn't her older brother sound so worried? His sister had vanished, hadn't she? Did timberwolves take her, or some other forest creature? Rarity swallowed, mustering all the composure she had to keep speaking and stand up straight. She was a lady, after all, even though most ladies avoided such a desperate scenario such as this and did not speak through barn doors.
Do you know where she is? Applejack, that is.
There was Rarity's heartbeat thumping in her ears. What could the answer possibly be?
Yup.
A wave of relief washed over Rarity, and she swayed clumsily with it, letting out the bated breath that she had been waiting with. And all over Applejack! How silly this would seem to her in hindsight. She, the proper mare and future Canterlotion, who got good grades, had good looks, and took fencing lessons with pride alongside martial arts, something every pony had a slight degree of envy for. Every pony but Applejack and Sweetie Belle. Big Macintosh probably didn't envy Rarity either, but he was an upper-class pony and they didn't talk all that much.
Where is she, then?
Rarity blinked expectantly to no pony at all. If she had proper eyelashes, like a real Canterlot lady, she'd flutter them, but alas, Rarity had no beautiful eyelashes, and privately, and to her embarrassment, she contemplated false ones. There was a shuffling on the other side of the door. Big Mac muttered something Rarity didn't hear.
Pardon?
She asked, lowering her voice.
What was it that you said?
Manhattan.
Now it was Rarity's turn to be silent. Big Mac spoke again.
She's in Manhattan.
Oh,
Rarity whispered, rather hoarsely.
will she be back soon, or?
Or what?
Nope.
Well, that was good to know.
Thank you, Big Macintosh. I will be heading home now. Maybe I'll see you at school?
And wasn't that a silly thing to ask? She was going to run home, wash up thoroughly, and eat some lunch. They lived in the same town, not different worlds, so surely she would see him again.
Yup.
He agreed. and then Rarity heard him shuffle off. That was that. She turned and began her trot home, even though it felt like a long way to Ponyville, and her legs were clearly weighed down by the mud that was beginning to dry on her lovely, pearly coat. Truthfully, Rarity wasn't sure what to do now. Forget about Applejack? Why? Applejack was... well, they weren't friends. They just lived in the same town and attended the same school. Or at least, they used to. And now? Rarity wasn't going to get a chance to say sorry. Probably not forever. And Rarity was no god. She wasn't like Princess Celestia. She wasn't even like Princess Miyamori Cadenza, if she could live anywhere close to forever too. But Rarity didn't want to forget Applejack any more than she wanted to forget about the handsome prince that would be waiting for her one day. Even if Applejack wasn't her friend and wasn't there to play with her at recess or to help her math homework, Rarity wasn't sure if she was ever going to see Applejack again. Manhattan was a city of glamour and glitz in its own right, hosting Bridalway. She was losing Applejack to that, if she ever had Applejack at all in the first place. She wasn't Prince. Of course not. Princes in any kind of royalty were as different from Applejack as possible. Rarity was going to spend the rest of her life with a prince. Eventually. Applejack was... gone. What was Applejack to her? A romance novel always called a pony like Applejack the one who got away. But that was only for ponies who loved and pined for one another. Rarity did not, and absolutely could not, love Applejack, especially since she wasn't a prince. She probably had honest-to-God's cooties on the days when Rarity saw too much dust on her coat too, but that didn't make Applejack a bad pony. Risking her hoof polish, or whatever remained of it, Rarity kicked a stone embedded surprisingly loosely in the mud with all the elegance she could muster alongside her dejected state. Applejack really wasn't a bad pony, so why did this have to happen to her? In Rarity's novels, bad things only happened to good ponies because it was a story, and so the drama would be excellent, and maybe other reasons too. Even bedtime stories did it. The story of Nightmare Moon was to show how much Princess Celestia had been through. She defeated Discord on her own, after all. But there was nothing grand about the lifestyle of stubborn old Applejack. She did not live in a big city, or anything dangerous. She was an apple farmer. Rarity knew that she would go home, and things had to be okay. Probably. Her mother was likely baking cookies. Her father was probably chatting hoofball with a friend, or fishing in their little house by one of Ponyville's many ponds. Rarity might even get a chance to see any fish he caught before he released it. After all, it wasn't like any pony would keep the fish they caught, even if they were allowed to, though some ponies did. The enchanted fish that sung cheesy songs and you could hang on your wall were nice. Rarity's father caught a salmon on one of his trips once, and now they had a singing salmon over the fireplace. Sweetie Belle. Of course Rarity's thoughts would drift to the baby sister she had to look after half of the time. She would never remember Applejack, even though Rarity told Sweetie all about her friends at school, and Applejack too. Not that Applejack was her friend, obviously. But... Rarity stopped, sniffled a bit, and swallowed before raising her head to look at the sky. The grey clouds were lumpy and whirl-like, and mostly blended in with one another in fluffy masses of varying shades of silver that held an odd grace to them. Why, one of them even looked like a hat. Rarity blinked, and it most certainly wasn't because her eyes were watering. It was because rubbing them might smear the bit of eyeshadow her mother let a filly her age get away with, and she wanted to see the clouds better. It could not be a hat, obviously. She looked up at the sky, squinting. It was a hat. Like a cow pony. Like Applejack's. Rarity swallowed the lump in her throat before continuing on the lonely road home. Was this what it was like to be a knight that failed to save the damsel from the dragons of despair? Most likely. Rarity sniffled again and tried to hold her head just a little bit higher. Because that little bit could make all the difference in, well, something. Right now, Rarity wasn't sure what. She was going to face something, she just didn't know it yet. An adventure? No, she was Rarity of Ponyville, who had yet to meet her prince and go to Canterlot, so adventure was not happening. School? She was not a horrid student, but she could always ask somebody else for help on math homework. Gods knew she was good at asking for plenty. Even her parents agreed on that. The truth? The truth about what? Applejack? Rarity paused, and slightly regretted it because of how gross this particular bit of mud was. Ugh, why did she have to stand here? What about Applejack? Rarity sighed, and looked up at the hat-shaped cloud, which was now drifting apart into two large chunks, just like the two big things she would have told Applejack if she were there. I'm sorry, and... Clearing her throat, Rarity flushed slightly. Truthfully, she might have liked Applejack a teeny, tiny bit, but not as a friend. Somewhere between Rarity's frazzled mane, dripping sweat, and quaking legs, Applejack reconsidered this entire meeting. In fact, Applejack had her doubts long before, when she had first confronted the problem. Rarity's problem. As simple and plain as the farm life, Rarity couldn't fight. Period. Once before, Applejack may have considered the unicorn's prowess given her feistiness during Twilight's first slumber party. The boldness, the uncracking determination to be on top, to win every argument, no matter how absurd. And the pillow fight! Indeed, it seemed Rarity could hold her own in a physical conflict. Then came the Diamond Dogs. Applejack was the first to visit Rarity the day after that fiasco. The problem had to be addressed. Rarity had to understand that fancy words, no matter how whiny or mind-grating, didn't always work. Applejack was no liar, and Rarity seemed to forget that, actually tearing up a bit at the farmer's harsh but true words. Rarity couldn't deny. Any pony who knew Rarity couldn't deny. Rarity couldn't fight. So, with averted eyes and a sticky, dry gulp, she agreed to Applejack's terms. Rarity would subject herself to the art of battle. She would forswear her sense of decency with a puffed chest and a proud chin. She would learn to fight. Threats of muddy tracks on every square inch of Carousel Boutique helped, of course. And now, 3 days later, in the lush, hilly, crisp, heavily unpopulated fields of Sweet Apple Acres, stood Applejack and the quibbling wreck she could loosely recognise as Rarity. Applejack was no liar, not even to herself. She felt terrible about this, but it was all out of love. Yes, that's it. Good old, tough beat-your-face-in love.
Don't be so nervous, Sugar Cube,
Applejack said with her best consoling smile. Rarity jolted to attention, apparently not knowing how long she'd been staring at the grass.
Nervous? Who's nervous? I'm certainly not nervous.
The moment Applejack kicked a hoof-sized rock before her, Rarity squealed and coiled back like a well-oiled spring. Applejack smiled sadly, almost losing her own nerve, almost giving Rarity another day to ready herself. But 3 extra days was more than enough. This had to be done. Soon, lest momentum be lost to Rarity's pleading wet eyes. Applejack walked to her friend with a smooth, brisk pace. Rarity forced her posture straight again, and shook even harder.
It's not as bad as it seems, Rares,
Applejack said, her eyes as gentle as she hoped they were. Obviously, that didn't work. Rarity was still shaking. Worse than before, in fact.
I don't know what to do,
Rarity whined. Applejack winced tightly, completely reluctant to look at those eyes any longer. But she did so anyway, her own eyes now aglow with pride, determination.
There's enough there now,
she commanded. On cue, Rarity snapped to attention, her flesh now rigid and still. That was a start. Still, Applejack wasn't blind to the challenges. She could not teach Rarity as she taught her sister Applebloom. A different approach was needed.
Fighting ain't all that scary, really,
Applejack began.
Fact, once you get past the pain, blood, fractured bones, and minor brain damage, it's kind of fun.
Applejack frowned, noticing too late Rarity grimace more and more after every word.
Oh.
Maybe she should have knocked her lights out and got it over with.
What I mean is...
Applejack cleared her throat.
The first time is always scary, and painful, of course, but once you get a feel for it, it's easy as breathing.
Applejack's heart swelled with relief as Rarity's eyes brightened.
You mean like sex?
Applejack never knew the feeling of a wrecking ball crashing into her face. But Rarity's comparison was just that, a wrecking ball to the face. She shook her head violently, if only to fade the blush that she knew was there.
Of all the... I don't even... What the Yes, it's exactly like that,
Applejack said, as matter-of-factly as she could. Somehow, some way, Rarity's ear-to-ear smile made Applejack die a little inside.
That sounds wonderful!
Rarity cheered.
If fighting is anything like carnal affairs, then I could really get behind it.
Finally, Applejack simply couldn't look at Rarity any longer.
Yeah, right.
A long silence unnerved Applejack. She dared to peek at Rarity, and immediately she wished she was somewhere else.
Applejack, surely you aren't telling me that you haven't...
Never, in all her natural-born days, had Applejack cursed her inability to lie. She needn't say a word, though. Her averted gaze was blunt as any truth.
Good heavens, darling! With how you've spoken of brutal poundings, taking and giving again and again until you've collapsed from exhaustion, I figured you...
Well, I haven't!
Applejack shouted, every bit as harsh as she intended.
Now, if you don't mind, we got lessons to get back to.
Preposterous, I say! No friend of mine will be ignorant to the rules of engagement!
Rarity declared with a skyward hoof. Applejack stared at Rarity like she'd asked what colour the sky was. Applejack double-took Rarity's words and meaning, and felt herself glaring fiercely at the unicorn. Rarity either didn't notice or didn't care.
Rules of engagement?
Applejack echoed in angry disbelief.
I'll have y'all know that I've seen plenty of stallions in my time.
Suddenly, Rarity's face was unbearably close to the farmer's.
And yet, Applejack, and yet,
she hissed.
Why, I've half a mind to say that the first rule escapes you.
Right then, right there, any shame for this meeting evaporated from the heat blasting off of Applejack. With a flat glare and a squared chin, she smashed her hoof into Rarity's face. Like a springy limp noodle, Rarity's neck straightened again, her face blank, her eyes hollow. It was quick. So quick, neither pony was certain which way Rarity's head turned, or how far. Seconds passed, and without a word or a shred of consciousness, Rarity collapsed.
First rule of engagement,
Applejack began with a turn on her hoof.
Talking is half the battle.
With the slightest shadow of a smile, Applejack sauntered away from her unconscious friend.
See you tomorrow, Rarity. Same time, same place.
A wet, grey, cotony night fell over the city of Manhattan as Applejack lay awake in the hotel room she shared with her very good friend, staring at the smoke detector on the ceiling. After a while, the smoke detector waved back.
Sorry,
she whispered, a bit sheepishly. The smoke detector burbled back at Applejack in its weird northern monkey tone. Among the many amenities of the big city hotel Rarity had booked for their latest friendship mission were in-room smoke detectors, which is to say, destitute, stranded, out-of-work breezies who were hired to perch on the ceiling lights and stay awake all night to watch for the smoke of a possible hotel fire. Rarity had assured her that it represented the ne plus ultra of safety and modern convenience, but Applejack just found it kind of weird. She also wondered what happened when the tiny little fairy horses had to use a privy. Pictures of tiny adorable bottles filled with tiny adorable fairy horse pee filled her mind's eye, and she actually let them linger there for longer than any sane mare probably should. She was, truth to tell, desperate for the distraction. Anything to help her not think about the loss of her beloved hat. That was a mistake. Just thinking about the event brought a sniffle to her nose and a tear to her eye.
Run over by a push-rail lawnmower. Such an ignominious fate for Paul's hat,
she thought, except for the fact that she did not literally use the word ignominious, because she wasn't familiar with it. If quizzed on the topic, she would have guessed that it referred to some kind of rather large ground squirrel. The hat. Applejack choked back a quick sob, hoping that the snowy white unicorn sleeping right next to her wouldn't hear. Fate had continued to conspire to put Rarity and Applejack in bed together. This time it had been a booking error in the reservation combined with a complete lack of rollaway beds in stock. AJ didn't mind it as much as she once had. It was actually kind of enjoyable sleeping next to a friend. Not in that way, of course. AJ's barn door famously swung only one way. And besides, even if she were to someday decide to install double-acting hinges on it, she would definitely hit up Twilight first. To AJ's appreciative eye, that mare really put the ass in Asperger syndrome. But Rarity did have her qualities, one of them being a certain sensitivity and delicacy. It was a sort of sensitivity and delicacy that nearly ensured she would not stay asleep while the mare in bed next to her wept. Rarity yawned, confirming Applejack's fears. The unicorn telekinetically shifted her sleep mask to a point just above her horn and blinked the sand out of her eyes.
Applejack, darling, are you quite all right?
Applejack struggled with a quick and dismissive answer, but she had once worn the element of honesty, and now it was sort of radioactively inside her at all times. In any case, glossing over it was out of the question. The workhorse let off a sigh filled with soppy, wet, countrified emotion.
Shoot, Rarity. I'm just thinking about the hat is all.
I knew it.
Rarity fussed, clicking the switch on the bedside lamp, the effect of which was to teleport a dozen innocent and disoriented fireflies from a field 50 miles distant into the lamp's globe.
It's the wrong color, isn't it? Applejack, I want you to know that even though my trained gaze picked out the exact right shade of felt to complement your already striking coloration, I, as a friend, respect your right to be completely wrong about your own fashion choices.
Not the replacement hat you bought me. That one's just fine.
Well, fine enough. Of course, it'd be going straight to the thrift store when she got home.
but it was perfectly serviceable as a spare in the meantime, and it had been very nice of Rarity to buy it for her.
The other hat. The one you threw away.
Say no more,
said Rarity, throwing off the covers and rising to her hooves.
We'll drive right back to the park and pick it out of the dustbin. I am, if I do say so myself, a miracle worker when it comes to garment repair.
Well, that's right neighborly of you. Ain't no need to go through heroics, though. I'm practical enough to know when a stitch of clothes needs to be put out to pasture.
Rarity smiled a sad, warm little smile, straightened the covers, and inched back into bed beside Applejack.
It means a lot to you, though. I can see that much.
AJ squeezed her eyes shut and nodded.
Here it comes.
Would you like to talk about it?
A deep, shuddering breath.
That hat was one of the last things my pa gave me before he passed on.
Oh, my darling. I'm so sorry.
Yep. One of the last 67,986 things.
A moment passed.
Pardon?
The breezy hanging from the ceiling chirped.
Pardon?
All of them were hats.
Said Applejack, the words coming easier now.
Gave them to me the day he passed. Just hours before, in fact. Pa entrusted me with that hat, along with 67,985 other ones, all exactly the same. They were his signature hats, Rarity. Weren't a day went by that Pa couldn't be seen wearing one of that vast multitude of hats. All 67,986 of them remind me so strongly of him that I can hardly stand it.
Well, that's terrible, Applejack. Terrible and a bit confusing. You own 67,000 of your father's hats.
67,986. Yep. Well, 67,985 now.
A fresh lump welled up in AJ's throat.
Where do you... I mean, they must take up a lot of space, yes?
We find room. Closets, outbuildings, whole entire attic, Fluttershaw's basement. We got some of 'em buried in an airtight metal shipping container underneath the south orchard. I know they're just things, Rarity, but sometimes when I wear one of 'em, it feels like a little piece of my pa's still with me.
AJ managed a little smile.
Specifically, 167,986th of 'em. Even thinking about 'em brings back memories of the day he gave 'em all to me. Almost like a flashback sequence in a story you're reading or something.
Cried Philly Applejack.
Look here! I went bobbing for apples and I managed to fit 9 of them in my mouth at the same time.
Well, well, well,
rumbled Pa Apple with a proud little smile.
I reckon that makes you the winner of the stupid stuff we do to make the kinfolk choke themselves to death contest.
Yee-haw!
Squeaked Philly Applejack.
I've got some bad news though, little sapling. The beavers done ran off with the trophy and we got nothing to give you.
Oh, that's okay, Pa.
Said Philly Applejack, snuggling up to her father.
Knowing I made you proud is all the trophy I need.
Pa Apple beamed, tears welling up in the corners of his eyes as he looked down at his eldest daughter. After a moment's thought, he reached up and removed the signature Stetson from his head.
Here, little sapling. I want you to have this.
Philly Applejack gasped.
Pa,
One of your 67,986 hats?
Yep, I'd say you earned it. Doing stupid stuff to kill ourselves off is a proud Apple family tradition, and by cramming 9 whole apples down your immature and undersized horse gullet, you have shown yourself to be a true member of the Apple family.
Oh, Pa! This is the best Apple family reunion ever! The hang gliding competition, them cages of tigers you got shipped in from the zoo, the live chemistry demonstrations.
And we're finishing it all off tonight with a fireworks display celebrating the opening of our brand new grain silo.
I'm gonna remember this day with fondness for my whole entire life.
I hope so.
Then Philly Applejack's face fell.
But what are you gonna do without your hat? I suppose you got 67,985 others, each one absolutely indistinguishable from the rest, right?
Well, that's just it, little sapling. Actually, I'm giving you all of them. Right now.
Pa stepped back and gave a sharp whistle. There was a rumble of hooves on earth, and in a flash, a huge moving company cart appeared, screeching to a halt in front of Philly Applejack. With a noise like an avalanche, the cart unloaded its vast payload of utterly identical Stetson hats directly on top of Philly Applejack. The tiny orange horse was completely buried in a 2-meter thick layer of stiff felt headgear. A moment passed. Came a muffled voice from far beneath the pile.
That's just the first cartload. Trust me, we got plenty more where that came from.
Pa Apple.
Came a sharp voice from the edge of the barnyard as the moving company cart rumbled away.
Are you finished giving all those hats to our daughter yet?
Almost, Honey Badger.
Well, make it quick,
said Ma Apple, trotting briskly up to the pile, her signature red hair bow bobbing with the motion of her gait.
We absolutely must have the ownership of all those hats transferred to our next of kin by sundown.
We got 8 more carts on the way.
Pa Apple reassured her.
Good. The assessors will be here soon, and if we fail in this, the tax consequences will be incalculable.
She paused.
Actually, that's not true. I have in fact calculated them, and they are staggering. Ruinous. You're sure you're officially transferring all 67,986 of them?
Counted them myself. But if we wanted to make absolutely sure, there's another way we could reduce our joint spousal millinery load.
You're talking about my hair bows,
said Ma Apple, her tone growing frosty.
I'm just saying, we got another daughter.
Forget it, Pa Apple. That stupid baby gets her hooves on my hair bows over my cold, dead body.
All right, Honey Badger, forget I said anything.
The same way you forgot to use protection last year?
Pa Apple gave a deep sigh.
What are we doing, Honey Badger? I mean, we keep raising barns and building silos, but sometimes I wonder if all this building ain't just a patch over our flawed and failing marriage.
Fine,
said Ma Apple, rolling her eyes.
I'll choke down some anti-nausea medication and we can have a talk about your feelings. Tomorrow. I've got better things to concentrate on tonight, like keeping the farm afloat in this tax climate, with no help from you, of course.
There was a brief, awkward silence.
Would this, be a bad time to bring up that me being into stallions thing?
Terrible,
said Ma Apple. Like some sort of bizarre sci-fi wasp monster bearing out of the flesh of his host, Philly Applejack finally made her way to the surface of the hat pile, scattering hats everywhere.
Yay! Hats!
She shrieked gleefully.
Hats! Hats! Hats!
You're adopted,
said Ma Apple.
They called it the Night of Knives,
said Applejack, staring out at the harbor.
To this day, it holds a record for the most members of the Apple family killed off in a 6-hour span.
Applejack, darling,
said Rarity, her eyes wide.
That's horrible! On so many levels!
Oh, shucks, Rarity. Ain't no big thing. It's just the Earth pony way, I guess. Wouldn't expect a unicorn to understand. It just makes me sentimental, thinking about all the good times Pa and I had together before things went wrong in a way the pony scientists are still struggling to describe or even understand. And that hat was one of the 67,986 links I had to him.
Well, at least you can feel good about the fact that it gave its life for a good cause. Executing the capricious whims of an unspeaking, unfeeling artifact of harmony and all.
Yeah, that does make it go down easier. I mean, I know, or at least blindly trust, that it's for the greater good. But there's still gonna be a sore place for a while.
We could go out and get a bite to eat? An apple croissant or something? I can never remember. Do you like apples?
Love 'em. But I ain't in the mood to nail on my horseshoes and go out in the cold right now.
Adri trotted back over to the bed and began crawling back under the covers.
How about that?
Certainly. And if it would help at all, my hooves are ready to hug you with all the generosity I can muster.
AJ screwed her face up.
Ain't that more like kindness, though?
Well, there's overlap. I call the big spoon.
Nestled in the comforting embrace of her very good friend Rarity, Applejack felt sleep finally begin to claim her. Sure, she had lost a token of another pony's affection, a pony who had meant very much to her, but it was good to know that there were other currently alive ponies that loved her too. Ponies called friends, who could take some of the hurt away and help her make it through the long, lonely nights. Losing Pa's hat was going to sting.
But at least I got 67,985 more,
thought Applejack. And with that, the two of them drifted into dreams. On the ceiling above the bed, the smoke detector cocked its head and looked down at the two ponies below. It said, in its weird northern monkey tongue,
So hot.
Welcome to the Carousel Boutique, where everything is... Oh, hello, girls. I wasn't expecting you this afternoon. Did I forget something?
Rarity glanced over towards the calendar hanging on her wall.
Not at all, Rarity. Do you have a minute?
Twilight asked, tilting her head as she peered into the shop from the open doorway. Fluttershy, Rainbow Dash, and Pinkie Pie crowded in behind her.
But of course! Come in! Come in!
Rarity's horn glowed as she took her needle and stuck it into her pincushion before stepping out from behind her workbench.
What can I do for you girls? Do you need new outfits for something? Oh, did Princess Celestia finally convince you to throw a ball?
What? No.
Twilight said, shaking her head as a group wandered inside, Rainbow Dash hovering overhead, while Pinkie Pie went over to make faces in one of the mirrors set against the wall.
We came to you to, talk to you about something.
Twilight rubbed her hoof against her foreleg.
Oh? Whatever's the matter?
Well, we've noticed that you've been spending a lot of time at Sweet Apple Acres.
Fluttershy said, staring at the floor.
And that you've been looking extra happy lately. Like, super extra happy.
Pinkie Pie said, beaming as she bounced over to rejoin the rest of her friends in the center of the room.
And you smell like apples.
Rainbow Dash crossed her hooves against her chest.
Like, really smell like apples. Like, I spend all day sleeping in Applejack's trees, and I don't smell that much like apples.
Rarity fanned herself with her hoof.
Oh, really?
Yes, really?
Rainbow Dash flew down, her snout a few inches away from Rarity's.
And, wow.
Rainbow Dash backwinged, waving her hoof in front of her snout.
Bit much?
What we're trying to say is, We all know what is going on.
Twilight cut in, stepping in front of Rainbow Dash. Rarity paled.
You do? I mean, I thought we were being subtle.
Oh, Rarity, it's all right. We all understand.
Twilight said, smiling gently as she set her hoof on Rarity's shoulder.
I don't!
Rainbow Dash's hooves cut through the air.
How could you keep it a secret? Don't you trust us?
Rarity winced.
Well, darling, you see, it's a sensitive matter. My career...
Oh, Rarity, do you really think that they would hold something like this against you?
Fluttershy lifted her head, smiling.
Well,
I think they'd appreciate it.
Twilight said, smiling. Rarity blinked.
What?
Yeah, who else would buy super expensive designer shampoo?
Pinkie Pie shouted. Rarity stumbled backwards against her vanity, landing on a rump.
Shampoo!
Yeah!
Rainbow Dash landed in front of Rarity, her wings flared.
I mean, you made some kind of new soap and you didn't even tell us? I mean, I can only use rain cloud scented body wash for so long before you can't ever get the smell out of your nose. Why do you think I spend all that time sleeping in Applejack's orchard?
What she means to say is, I think we're all a little bit sick of the stuff they sell down at Barnyard Bargains, and we'd like to try something a little bit different.
If, you don't mind, that is.
Fluttershy said, dragging her hoof across the carpet.
I see.
Rarity shook her head, composing herself.
Well, I'm sorry to say I don't have any left. Yes, I used the last of it just this morning.
I can tell.
Rainbow Dash said, sticking out her tongue.
I can smell you all the way from over here.
Oh, really?
Rarity's cheeks flushed.
My, well, it is not supposed to be that strong. Oh, well, guess I'll just have to start over again.
Wait.
Twilight said, raising her hoof.
How can you be out? I saw you go over to Sweet Apple Acres just last night.
You see... Well...
Rarity fidgeted, smiling a bit too broadly.
It just wasn't coming out right, so we just started a new batch. As you said, it is much too strong, and you can still smell it all the way over there. Why, we'll just have to throw out this batch and start a new one too.
I'll say,
Pinkie Pie said, springing forward.
You really smell like apples today.
She leaned forward, sniffing.
Yeah, especially your tail.
Rarity coughed, tucking her tail close against her rump.
You see? We'll just have to start all over.
Fluttershy shook her head.
Oh, Rarity, you don't have to do that.
I don't know. I'm pretty sick of rain cloud scent. I tried just about anything.
Pinkie Pie perked up.
Oh, you can borrow mine.
Anything except that.
Rainbow Dash amended quickly.
Seriously, my whole house turned pink after the last time I tried that. I didn't even know bubble bath could mix with clouds.
Well...
Rarity said, turning her head slowly as her friends all smiled at her expectantly.
I suppose. I'll see what I can do.
Yes! No more rain cloud!
Twilight beamed.
Thank you, Rarity.
Are you sure? You do realize this is experimental shampoo, don't you?
Rarity said, grimacing slightly.
Oh, Rarity, it's not like you're putting bleach in it or something.
Twilight waved her hoof.
I'm sure it will be fine. Besides, we'd be happy to be your guinea pigs.
As long as it doesn't make our manes fall out or something.
Rainbow Dash added, narrowing her eyes. Rarity tittered nervously.
Of course not. Applejack, we have a problem!
From down in the cellar.
Applejack called, her voice muffled by tons of dirt and wood. Rarity's horn lit up, casting open the wooden doors before stepping down onto the stairwell, slowly walking down beneath the barn on Sweet Apple Acres.
I thought we finished up down here last night.
Rarity said, making her way down the stone steps.
Nah, I just said so on account of you looking tired and all.
Applejack!
Rarity pouted, but the effect was wasted on the dark stairwell.
I'm have you working yourself to the bone while I'm around. I said I would help.
Well, Rarity, I'm just about done with it now.
The sound of wood scraping on stone made Rarity's ears swivel as she stepped down into the dimly lit room, the scattered light's soft glow glinting off of dozens of barrels set against the back walls of the earthen room.
Where are you?
Right here, Sugar Cube.
Applejack said, trotting out from between a row of barrels set up against the far wall.
Hooey! I never would have been able to do this in 2 days without you.
Rarity smiled in spite of herself as Applejack took off her Stetson and wiped her brow with her hoof.
Well, I'm glad I could help.
Rarity's smile faded.
But we have a problem.
Really?
Applejack set her hat back on her head and walked over.
What is it?
Twilight saw me coming here last night, and she and the girls came to see me today.
Oh.
Applejack stopped in her tracks, tilting her head slightly.
Is that a bad thing?
Rarity sat back, casting her hooves over her face.
It was simply the worst possible thing!
Applejack arched her eyebrow.
Is that the I got a spot on my dress kind of worst? Or the Twilight went crazy and brainwashed half of Ponyville kind of worst?
They thought we were making shampoo!
Applejack stared for a moment before collapsing to the floor laughing, clutching at her chest as she rolled on her back, hooves kicking up into the air. Rarity stamped her hoof.
I'm serious.
I know, darling, it's just...
Applejack cackled, shaking her head and waving her hoof at Rarity as she rolled back over, getting her hooves back under her.
That's just the funniest darn thing I ever heard. Shampoo?
She laughed again, her whole body shaking.
They wanted me to make some! For them!
Applejack smirked broadly.
You tell him you ain't planning on sharing? 'Cause I sure ain't.
Be serious. This is a big problem.
I am being serious.
Applejack stepped up next to Rarity, giving her a light shove with her shoulder.
You know they're gonna figure out about what we've been doing sooner or later. Way I figure it, better sooner.
But my career!
Rarity wailed.
Now, Rarity, I know them highfalutin city ponies got their noses stuck in the wrong end of them, but that don't mean any pony really cares.
Applejack cast her hoof over Rarity's shoulders.
Why, I heard that hoity-toity fella got married in Las Pegasus just last week.
To a bear, Applejack!
Really? Huh. Could have fooled me.
Applejack rubbed her chin.
Now, is that a mare or a...
Applejack!
Applejack winced.
Sorry. I was just fooling.
She gave Rarity a squeeze around the shoulders.
Still, I don't think it's gonna work. Our friends got their hearts in the right places, and you know they're good at keeping secrets. But sooner or later, Pinkie Pie's gonna catch wind of our anniversary or something, and then it'll all be over.
I know,
Rarity said, staring down at the floor.
Don't worry. You know they won't think less of us.
Applejack nuzzled up against Rarity's neck.
Besides, worst comes to worst, you can always come here and make cider with us. I know how much you like squeezing apples.
Rarity huffed, tipping her head up primly.
You're simply the worst, you know that?
I reckon I do.
Applejack pressed herself in against Rarity's side, her tail flicking against the unicorns as she began to rub her snout against her mare friend's jaw.
Applejack, you dirty!
Rarity stepped aside, only to be quickly followed by the Earth Pony.
You're going to make me smell like apples all over again!
Applejack chuckled.
Huh, is that what gave you away?
She asked, as she leaned forward to nibble at Rarity's ear, raising up on her hind legs to wrap her front hooves around Rarity's shoulders.
Besides, I thought you liked how I smelled.
I do,
Rarity said, face flushed, her knees bowing slightly as Applejack leaned against her.
But what will I tell the others when they come to see if we made more soap? You could at least take a bath first.
Applejack laughed as she rubbed her chin against the back of Rarity's neck.
Way I reckon, you're gonna smell like apples either way.
Rarity shivered.
And why is that?
Applejack leaned forward, her breath tickling at Rarity's ear.
You know what they say, darling. You are what you eat.